tournament versus the men's. The men's teams had a full weight room, better meals compared to the women, prompting major backlash on social media. So we want to take a deeper look now at women in sport and the discrimination they continue to face despite breaking barriers. In many cases, also breaking history. Joining me, Sami Small, former goalie for the Canadian national team, three-time Olympic medalist and four-time world champion. Wendy-Ann Clarke also joins us, multimedia journalist and sports writer. So good to have your voices on the program today. Thank you both.
Thanks for having me.
Let me get your reaction, Wendy-Ann. Let's start with you first. Seeing that video with regards to the NCAA's handling of the women's teams versus the men's. Wendy-Ann, what was going through your mind?
Really, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed for the NCAA. You know, I have a dear friend who has a daughter that plays basketball. She's in high school now, and I see how hard she works and how she wakes up in the morning before school and after school commits herself to training and to tournaments every weekend, and the sacrifice of that family. And basically, when I saw those pictures juxtaposed next to each other with the men's weight facility and the women's weight facility, I thought, the message that we're telling them is that that's how much your blood, sweat, and tears and sacrifice is worth. You know, 1972 was when Title IX legislation was passed that was supposed to require equal treatment for male and female players within the NCAA. And so for 2021 to come around and see something like that, you know, the justification has always been that women don't turn a profit. And, you know, the Washington Post recently published a piece that talked about a financial analyst that did an investigation of the 2018-2019 season that found that Division I women's basketball turned in close to $1 billion. You know, he said, I don't see how they can be losing money. So we need to stop blindly accepting this narrative that women don't turn a profit and really hold the NCAA and other organizations to account at this point.
Yeah, and I think you touched on so many important points there. 1972, that's when things were supposed to be equal. Sami Jo, I know that you can argue quite differently. Your time on the ice, your fight on the ice, certainly speaks volumes to that.
Yes, I mean, I love that Wendy-Ann backed it up with data. It is about time that we're having this conversation, but I also love that we're in an era that we're having this conversation. Those pictures have existed for years and years. And, you know, a decade ago, those were put on social media and nobody there would not have been an uproar. So the fact that I had the opportunity to play elite sport, to play professional sport is because of women before us that fought for these rights. And so I think we're doing a disservice to all those women whose shoulders we stand on now to have these amazing opportunities when we see things like this that still are not fair and equitable when they're supposed to be. Women are going to canoe at the Olympics in Tokyo for the first time ever. Like as if women couldn't canoe prior to this, but this is the first time it will be in the Olympics. So there's still some huge discrepancies when it comes to men's and women's sport. And I just love that we're in an era where now this conversation is moving forward and I'm starting to see progress and change.
Exactly. And you're seeing a lot more voices coming to the forefront, a lot more younger voices. Wendy-Ann, the fight also does continue for women of color, Black women, Indigenous women, often being sidelined even further. Talk to me about that now side of the fight.
You know, historically, we've known that the progress of white women hasn't always meant the progress of women of color. You know, I'm a track and field enthusiast, and, you know, we know that you know, the Boston Marathon, for example, didn't allow women to compete until 1967. And a smash cut to 2019 at the World Championships, you have, you know, women of color like Allyson Felix, Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, and Nia Ali, who all had recently given birth and competed and won gold at that championship game. And then there's been a discrepancy in the treatment of women, Black women in maternity. And we know that historically that's been a problem. And Felix has been in a battle with Nike over the fact that she had pay cuts, sponsorship cuts because of pregnancy. And this is an argument and an issue that has been going on for a very, very long time with with women, and for a brand like Nike that is supposed to be social justice oriented, or touts itself to be social justice oriented, to have an issue with a brand like that, it's really, really troubling, and because of the outcry and because of her very bold piece that she put in the New York Times, that she talking about her journey, giving birth and not being supported by Nike, that they were forced to announce a new maternity policy to support women during and after pregnancy for 18 months. So I agree with Sami Jo that it's great that we're having these conversations, but it's also just crazy that we're now beginning to have them.
Right, we're now sort of drumming up the voice on it. And Sami Jo, I want to ask you then. I mean, why should we still be having these conversations when women are athletic, they're talented? I mean, it's incredible watching women on the field, the ice, the court, on the track, because it's a different level of athleticism that you can watch and enjoy. But there's been this constant fight for the same support in terms of funding, recognition, as we clearly continue to see happening here. Rah for us for having the conversation. But I guess it comes back down to, like, why are we still having this conversation when we should be talking about, the great accolades women have made in their sport already, not having to fight to get to that position?
You're so incredibly right. I think it's a generational shift, and I'm 45 years of age. When I started to play hockey, it was unacceptable for girls to play hockey. There was no girls hockey teams, and I'm only fortunate to have had a father that had a sister that was good at sports, and he could see that and have that foresight. But I never once stopped to think why none of my peers were playing. I just thought they didn't like hockey. It never dawned on me that their parents didn't allow them to play, that perhaps there was no teams in their area, the coaches wouldn't allow them on the teams. I just had this amazing experience, but I never stopped to think about why I was able to have that. And so that's one thing I try to really encourage kids, is to stop and think about the experience you're having and how much fun it is, and look around you and think, who can I include in the game? And I think, I play a predominantly white sport, and we're trying to change that within the game. And how do we do that? It's inclusion. It's making it accessible. It's showing this great game, whatever sport it is. It's allowing all people within the community to be able to play and have access to play. But fast forward, another generation, and I was able to make a living playing hockey. And now girls can walk into arenas, and it doesn't matter if you have a ponytail. It doesn't matter if you have a hockey bag slung over your shoulder or figure skates. There's not even a question. So we are now becoming part of the fabric of Canadian society. And now I think it's really the time to think about the next generation and how we can get them to have a fair and equitable pay standard so that they can actually make a living doing these sports. I think for the longest time, for me, I was just happy to be there. Like a lot of, I think, women that were able to play in my generation, we were just so fortunate and just feel so privileged that we were able to have this opportunity. No longer is it like that. There was 11 million people watched the Olympic final in Pyeongchang at the last Olympics in women's hockey. Yeah. So there's people out there that love this sport, and I'm just excited to harness those people and move forward together so that we can create really a professional women's hockey place for these young girls to play in and aspire to.
Yeah, no, you're right, and it certainly has changed. My daughter played hockey, played on the boys' team for quite some time, didn't have a change room to play in. Now, certainly, it's really different. Wendy-Ann, I want to get your quick last-minute thoughts here. Are you hopeful towards change?
Absolutely. I'll be hopeful to my grave, and I agree that, I'm so grateful to be a part of this generation where we're actually seeing traction begin to move, and that people are actually hearing when we're having these conversations, there's actually people listening, and we're holding people to account through social media. And, I coach track and field, and we have lots of girls, and many of them are involved in other sports inside of track and field as well. And when I look in their eyes, I can tell that they don't believe that their gender will be a limitation in their sport. So it's really up to us as media, as athletes, as parents, as sports executives to really do our part to steadily push towards creating a world where that's actually true across the board.
Absolutely. And I love that you noticed that in their eyes, that strength and that fight. Former goalie for the Canadian national team, Sami Jo Small, and multimedia journalist Wendy-Ann Clarke. As I said, it's such a pleasure and honor to speak to both of you. Thank you so much for this.